I want a full new country. So that's going in the direction of Singapore, it's going in the direction of Dubai. So first, we shouldn't forget that Singapore and Dubai and even Abu Dhabi are network states.
Sure.
And one of the reasons why I do that is because people don't realize how much geography determined history in the past. Our democracy is based on technology that's 250 years old. And then my 7th article got 45 million views.
Did you have much of a mission when you set out on writing this stuff?
I think at the beginning, when people start, they should not have a specific idea of I want to do it. Like just write. Each order of magnitude is going to have a completely different challenge. And it doesn't get easier. The counterintuitive secret they know is that the conversion rate from free to paid is much higher than people expect. As a creator, I made a big mistake, which is I found it intellectually boring.
Hello and welcome to ARC Firesides on Network and City States. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here, our huge live audience. I appreciate your attendance and participation. I'm very lucky to be with Tomas from Uncharted Territories. Thank you for being here for a fireside.
Thank you for having me, and more broadly in network school. This is crazy. I really feel like the future is shaping here.
No, I love it. I want to just hear so much more of your reflections on that, actually. Yeah. We were just discussing that, actually, this is not your first time sort of here, but why don't we dial a little bit further back than that as well? Yeah. Almost like, just tell us a little bit about you, like where are you from?
Yeah. I'm originally European, I'm French and Spanish, and then became American after spending 15 years in the Bay Area, working in tech and products and growth there. Then went back to Europe and started writing these newsletter, this Substack around 5 years ago. It's about geography, history, politics, AI, tech, internet, anything, longevity, anything that might help us understand the future and where we're going and nudge it in the right direction.
And so, again, so in Europe, moved across to the Valley for school or for school job, for school, high school or uni school?
Grad school,
right? What were you studying?
MBA.
MBA. Okay.
So I'm an engineer by training, and then business.
And then into sort of like big tech in the Valley, startups or?
Right. Yeah, mostly startups, some bigger companies. So video games, fintech, financial technology, education technologies, and marketplaces.
And were you thinking about this sort of stuff kind of like back then?
So it's fun because there are so many parallels. The reason why I was doing internet is because it's the easiest way to have a huge impact because the numbers are so big. So this is very different from that today. But there are a lot of similarities. Like for example, I see what's happening here in network school and all these network states as a cold start problem, right? The same as in marketplaces in tech, where you're starting, like there's lots of network effects. When everybody's in the city, everybody wants to go, but when there's nobody wants to go. So how do you get it started? So that's one of the things, for example, that I thought for years about. And then when I come to a place like this one, I'm obsessing about that.
Yeah, actually, you need to meet Kavash. Have you met this team in here? Yeah. Okay, it's just interesting. They would. I agree completely with that too. But okay, so you were saying you've always been thinking about similar concepts and actually building companies solving similar maybe like problems, right? Mm-hmm. And then, okay, 15 years building companies and you thought you would start a Substack. So what was the like original idea and motivation for that?
It was very fortuitous because I was doing my thing in the Bay Area, and then I started a blog on Medium. And then my 7th article got 45 million views.
Interesting.
And that's just at the beginning of COVID. And then the second one got like 25 million, and governments around the world started picking it up to drive their policy, which is freaking nuts. Like a guy that is writing an article like in his underwear, in his apartment, after 3 weeks of reading papers on the topic, and then becomes that kind of influence. That's kind of super crazy. So but I started getting an audience there, and I kept doing this thing in parallel for a few years until I was making more money doing that newsletter
Yeah.
in my day job.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, I can give up all the meetings.
Yeah.
I can wake up whenever I want. I can work on whatever I want. I don't have a boss.
Yeah.
And so like I just left.
No, it makes sense. And again, so again, you started on Medium, and there was a few posts before you hit that first crazy viral one. But I guess like, what was the first post on? And I guess like, what did you have much of a mission when you set out on writing this stuff, or like were you just like, okay, like I got these ideas and insights and I want to start documenting them?
I think at the beginning when people start, they should not have a specific idea of I want to do it. Like just write.
Yep.
Just write. And so I was just writing, and so some were about startups, some were about how to become great at something, but I was also writing a lot on AI on the side. And what's going to happen with inequality in AI. So already some of these topics were emerging.
Interesting.
But I didn't feel in a position to publish on them at that time.
Interesting. Okay, but so the first one that really took off then you said was your 7th Medium article.
Yeah.
What was that one on?
Well, so it's Why You Must Act Now. So that was March 10th, 2020. And it was basically telling the world a week before it would close that the entire world was about to close. And so it just happened a few days later.
Yeah. It's very interesting because that, Balaji's following was significantly smaller pre his COVID speaking. And then you've had this huge post. I did some early warnings in February on Instagram, but I deleted my Instagram. And there's no, but it's sort of interesting that other people that did know me, my very small social crowd at that point, actually always point back to that.
Yeah.
Like you actually did this weird stuff. And
there was a lot of chatter at the time, right? So even in January, I think Balaji was in January, and then February, I think what was special about that piece, it was just the right place, the right time, just before, and then very, very clear around this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then because everything happened exactly that way, which was not very hard because it's just saying, hey, what's happening in Italy is going to happen everywhere else.
Sure. Yeah.
But then like that just struck a chord.
Yeah, but some people struggle with that sort of extrapolation and the speed of some of these exponentials, right? And they just put it down.
So very, very interesting because one of the things I had done in the past was work in viral apps. And so the viral modeling was very clear to me. And so you see this thing is like, of course, it's going to become global.
Yes. It's actually so interesting that, isn't it, right? Because you're broadly in the game when you're building startups, right? Of you're fucking messing around with 5 people, but you're already always trying to build products and processes that just scale infinitely, right? And it's like, it's always trying to get to that inflection point where things then almost like get out of control and just have this momentum in themselves. It's actually very interesting how that relates to this sort of like early things, right? But if you,
I built a few apps, very much on this topic, that became viral. So one of them got 10 million users in 7 months. And so for months, I was obsessing about the K factor, right? The K factor is how many users each new user is going to bring, right? And so it's like, 0.7 is not going to work. You need to bring it. 0.8, it's not enough. And then you see, okay, it's 1.5 for COVID. Early on, it gets 1.5. Like, of course, this is going to win.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
It's very interesting. But okay, so interesting. So that was the first crazy. And you said that, so you said the 8th post also got like, or 10th post got like 25 million views as well, right? Yeah. Was that similar? Were you talking about COVID and the effects of that on the world for a little while, or?
To me, like, it's also like very simple stuff, but it was basically using a cost-benefit approach to COVID. That's sure. You're saying, hey, this is very problematic. You need to get the R. R is the K factor, is the viral factor, from 1.5 to just below 1. That's it.
Yep.
And you want to do that in the most cost-effective way. Now you take the most expensive stuff, that in terms of the cheapest stuff in terms of the economy, that is going to have the highest impact on R, and you start with that, and then you keep going down, blocking things until you get below 1. That's it. So don't have big big events with lots of people all in a room that's enclosed. Don't do that, right? But if people want to run outdoors, just do that. Right?
Yep.
So like just that super basic stuff.
Yeah.
But when nobody knows how to think about something, what should I do? Then it helps.
It's very hard. Were you also considering opportunity costs of each of these sort of like, kind of like options?
Of course, they have to, right? So but that's the entire thing, right? You're right. It's the cost benefit. You think about all the costs, all the benefits. You're right.
Yeah.
Most people don't think about cost of opportunity. So yes, yeah.
Yeah, no, fine, no, amazing. So, okay, so you said that immediately governments are calling you up as well, right? Yeah. Just explain a little bit about that, right? What was your first call? What was your first, whatever insight you can sort of like give?
So it's interesting because in that type of situation, governments have 100 million people screaming at their ears,
Yeah.
and they have a very a hard time filtering who to listen to.
Sure.
That was the key problem that they were trying to solve, and they have no expertise, so they just don't know who to listen to. And so many of them would not reach out. I did get a lot of calls of like on the back, hey, thank you for this article, and it was very useful. And then lots of people like Angela Merkel, for example, mentioning my strategy to follow it. But you don't have a lot of people just straight calling you because they have already these influences that are battling behind the doors for that influence.
Sure.
But I remember like finding myself in front of the president of Costa Rica at the time and telling him about. I was basically telling him, I'm sorry, but in your case, you probably want to let COVID run because you have no way of controlling it. And like lots of your economy happens outdoors, so it's not that bad. And so it's very eerie to have like the level of expertise that I have of like 2-3 months and been talking with the president of Costa Rica.
Yeah. Like in the land of the blind, the man with one eye is king, right? And you were, right? You were just 2 months ahead, right? And that was everything, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so interesting. Well, how long did you stay on people's speed dial for COVID?
So as a creator, I made a big mistake, which is I found it intellectually boring, as in like it's pretty straightforward, right? If your R is above 1, you're fucked. If it's below 1, you're good. Like,
Sure.
that's it.
Sure.
Right? And then do that until you get vaccines and treatments. And the moment you have accelerate that as much as you can. And the moment you have that, you release everything.
Yep.
Right? So intellectually, it was not that complex. And so I got bored of it very fast, and I didn't write too much about it. I think in retrospect, I would have been writing 2 articles a week for a year or two to maximize it. But I find that so intellectually boring that I sacrifice that for just writing about whatever I'm interested in.
But is that actually something is that a lesson you've learned from, or is that just a part of you and that's how you've stayed?
I kind of knew it, but it became very obvious because there's some people gathered massive accounts, multi-million followers, and I didn't, but I knew at the time. It was like, I'm not doing this because I don't want to be doing it. I don't want to spend my time doing this.
Yeah, fine. So you've kept that. You found a message that works, but you've gone like, I've said it. I'm going to go on and teach you something else, as opposed to just like repeating the same fucking thing.
And I think in retrospect, I would say, okay, it's good to gather an audience, so I should have, selfishly, I should have written more about it. But also, like, it's not because you've solved a problem intellectually that people have fully understood it. And so, like, there's a lot of social value in hammering that message over and over.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting. Again, one of the interesting things, I don't know if you've reflected on that here, is that actually Network School is, I think like Bladgy as well, he's always been talking about this sort of like founder influencer, this founder creator alongside this like founding engineer. It's probably like one of the most like pro content creator influencer spaces, like tech spaces that I've probably ever been. And actually just, I know I get to learn a lot from that, and I struggle with one of these things here. Like people are like, what's the message? And you just keep on saying it. Or like people are saying all the time, like just tweet the same message 20 times a month. And I'm just like, can't quite get there,
all
right?
The time. So it's fun that you say this because I was researching it on Twitter, some stuff, and then I saw a tweet that got 2-3 million views, and I stumbled upon another tweet that was a copy of that tweet 2 weeks later that had like 20 million views. And then that some creator then copied the same tweet and then a year later posted it again, like 6 million views. And it's like yes, you can steal like an artist, you can, whatever works already. It's very hard to get something to work. Take what works and apply it 100 million times, because the world is very big and people don't remember, so you can reuse that stuff all the time.
It's insane. You do see those ones just come back, right?
All the time. A bit less now with the change of algorithm, but yes, we do.
But okay, so anyway, so again, you're saying that, you had these few viral posts very early on. and you thought that, you'd done your job, you'd laid out the facts, you told people what they need to do, and you moved on from COVID. So like what happened? You're still on Medium at this point, and
I had switched to Substack, and so the interesting thing that happened there is, I had a Medium. I was gathering emails through MailChimp, and I had to pay a bunch of money to MailChimp to be sending these emails.
sure.
Substack, I can do it for free.
Yeah.
So I just took my audience to Substack.
Yeah.
And then at the beginning, Substack said, like, who did you steal these emails from? Like, are these people yours?
Yeah.
And so, yes, they were mine. And then they saw, like, I kept sending stuff on Substack, and so they came to me and say, look, like, if you come and write a couple of articles a week, we're gonna give you this money for a year.
Yeah.
And then I said, like, there's no way, like, that makes no sense. This is a lot of money. No way you can afford this. He's like, yeah, I think you can make this amount of money. So the deal is, we give you this money up front for a year, and you keep only 10% of the revenue, and then after that is the other way
It's up to you. Yeah, okay.
And the bet is, we believe you can make this amount of money, so we're going to front it to you.
Yeah.
So that now you come and you keep doing it.
Love it.
And they were right. And they were right. And so that's how I started. And I did it for the money was one of the reasons, but also you need a forcing function to write. And for me, that was a perfect forcing function. I had to write 2 articles a week. So I did that. And after a year or so, I was actually making more money there than in my day job.
Yeah. I mean, incredible. Like,
Crazy.
I guess clearly that was a deliberate strategy as Substack. That wasn't an exception for you. That was something they rolled out for people like whatever, and amazing. And so a couple of viral articles, they were like, this stuff's going to work. That's very cool. So I came across the Substack, got this effectively contract to write 2 articles a week. Was there any remits or constraints of what you were meant to write about?
And that was the crazy thing. I was like, I was famous on COVID.
Sure.
Like, I'm so tired of COVID.
Yeah.
And so my conversion rate, because the entire thing they say is, the counterintuitive secret they know is that the conversion rate from free to paid is much higher than people expect.
Okay.
Right? So, like, people expect maybe 0.1% of people free convert.
Yeah.
Substack claims it's 5 to 10%. It's not that for me, but there's a lot
more than a bit more
room between 0, 1 and 5, right? Yeah. And so that's what they play with, and so that's why they can front it, and that's why I think they've been so successful, because once you have all the supply, like we're talking about network effects. Yeah. Like in your marketplace, and Substack really has aspects of a marketplace of supply and demand. Yeah. Like you in that case, you need to first secure the supply. Yep. Which are the articles. Yep. And then you're going to get the readers, and then you can have network effects. In that case, they needed to secure supply, and they did it by just paying people. Yeah. And I think that was super clever.
And now again, they have an audience, and they can direct that, I guess, at people like you, right? They know, yeah.
Right. And so now, for example, an example of this is Substack Notes is working reasonably well. It's getting a reasonable amount of traction. Lots of people used to use Twitter, and now they default to Notes because they think it's more thoughtful than Twitter. And so it's working. It's working. Mm-hmm. I think I read I saw this graph where they were looking at all the media landscape, and every media outlet has reduced their number of readers between 2025 and 2024. Part of that is because there's no elections, and we're elections last year. Yeah. But the one that has been gaining is Substack, and I think it's because of strategies like that.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Okay, so what did you write about? You just got a contract. You have to write a minimum of 104 articles this year.
Whatever I wanted.
You were like,
okay. And so, and I explored that a little bit, but geography and history, AI, longevity, things like this, like the big things, network states, the big things that I think that are going to drive the future. And a lot of it is through what I feel like is going to be important. Part of these are obvious, like longevity, of course, it's a thing about the future. Yeah. Space economics, of course, is the future. But I think maybe the part that is less intuitive is history. I do a lot of geography and history. And one of the reasons why I do that is because people don't realize how much geography determined history in the past. And that's very important because it doesn't in the future. It doesn't anymore. And so if you cannot understand how much geography determined what happened in the world, you cannot realize how much of a schism there is in history today.
Yeah, by the fact that it's not going to be constrained by the same forces that were in the past, right?
And so whenever people say, oh, this has never happened, therefore it cannot, that is wrong now.
Yes.
That is wrong.
No, I love that. And that's actually like a little bit because Balaji here often talks about history running in reverse, or in the very least history rhyming. And I guess like, I'm very skeptical of history for several reasons. Like one is that like we can barely agree on what happened yesterday, let alone what happened like 1,000 years ago, right? And then two, I'm just exactly this lesson. I'm just like, it seems to me, from my experience of building, again, like apps to startups, again, that the smallest differences in UX or situational market generate massive outcome differences, right? And so I'm just like, fuck me, the difference it seems probably in like the data we have in terms of like the delta we have between the truth and what we know about it is probably larger than the delta of the difference required to have a different outcome. So I sort of like meh on that regard, which is maybe a little bit counterintuitive to, I guess, that general rhetoric. There's like all these lessons that you can learn from history. I'm assuming you still,
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think it's important to make the difference between the rules that are fundamental and big and the ones that are not in that regard. So just to give you an example, in history, one of the key rules is if you have a river on flat land, you won the lottery. Because usually it means that the entire area is going to be very agriculturally fertile, and so you can make a lot of food, which also means that you're going to have a lot of population, but also it also means usually that you can navigate in it. And if you can navigate, the cost of transportation is much cheaper, therefore you can do trade, and trade is the way to get wealth, and so you can get rich, right? So that's one fundamental rule. Similarly, there's some fundamental rules in tech. We mentioned one of them, like the network effects before, like very, very fundamental rule, right? And then you can draw some consequences for these. For example, there hasn't been a new social network that hasn't grown on the back of a new medium. So like MySpace, at the time of MySpace and Facebook, like they were competing. Facebook really captured the standard post of, a little bit of text, maybe a picture or not, right? Twitter grew on the back of a short tweet. Instagram grew on the back of an image, focus on the image. TikTok grew on the back of video, short video. YouTube grew on the back of long video, right? And after each one of these, you don't have another one. Like once Twitter has the short text, you don't have another one that...
Because they have the entrenched network effects and it's impossible to overcome.
Exactly.
Right?
But for that, we need to really have introspected, really grabbed the idea of network effects. You have to fully understand it. And so, but then that helps you project a lot of things. Like for example, if you understand this, you understand that Blue Sky cannot win. But you also can understand that Sora has a chance at becoming a new social network. And so I think right now, Sora is underrated. It has a chance of becoming a new social network because AI-generated video is a different medium.
It's very interesting, right? So I guess a pattern of what we're talking about here are like the lessons from company building that apply to world building, for want of a better kind of like phrase. And so I guess like, one of the things that's interesting about this new movement is sort of just like actually considering countries as maybe companies can build things alternate like structures to this, right? And do you think that is true? Do you think like companies can take on the role of governments or the role that countries have historically performed?
That's such a big question. It's such a big question.
Hey, we've got time, so just start wherever you like.
Because so like let's start with the aspect of governance here.
Sure.
I think everybody says, "Oh, democracy doesn't work," but there's very little debate on why it doesn't work and what's better than that. Right? In many ways, I think there was a paper recently that showed that autocracy, if I don't remember the details, but in many cases, autocratic governments were as good as democracies for economics, right? And you can see it with things like Singapore or China, right? Especially Singapore, Dubai, and these are autocracies, and they work amazingly well, right? And so, okay, but then what does it mean for democracy? Like, why this idea, which is intuitive, of people governing themselves why doesn't it work as well as the theory? And for me, there's a key issue there around the execution. Our democracy is based on technology that's 250 years old.
Yep.
Like nearly every democracy on earth is based on U.S. democracy from the 1780s, and the key issue there, the key technological limitation was how much information the people can convey to the government. You live in like 9 million square kilometers in the United States, very big country. Much of it is farming. How do you convey information to the government? Well, it's once a year, once every 4 years through a paper, right? And it has to be at the end of, like in November, because that's the harvest thing, like the optimal for harvest, just after the harvest, whatever, right? That's like 4 bits of information every 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
That is so little compared to amount of information that you can
Yep.
push today, right? And so I compare that to Wikipedia, where before Wikipedia, before the internet, the way people wrote articles for encyclopedias were like you had like 60 to 100 people in a room as the encyclopedia makers, and they study things in their room, and they talk with experts, and then decide what the canonical article is going to be for an encyclopedia. And then it turns out that when you open this up to billions of people, they can write the articles, more articles, faster and higher quality, right? And so really what they've done is a mechanism for information aggregation.
Yes.
Today, lawmaking is a few hundreds of people in a room talking with experts, deciding what the outcome, the article is going to be, like an encyclopedia article, but it happens to be a law. So it's the exact same thing. So you know that there's a mechanism for information aggregation that will be superior to that. If you do that, you don't even need to elect officials. Because the reason why you elect officials is because they are, I cannot convey enough information to the government, therefore I
They're a
elect a bundle.
representative.
A representative. And a representative is a bundle. Is a bundle of all the things that they say they're going to do. But you can unbundle that. You like there is a mechanism that we haven't invented yet where everybody can say, okay, these are the problems that matter the most. These are the potential solutions for these problems, and therefore this is what we should do. And in that world, you don't even, it's better democracy, and you don't have elections, right? So just the concept of better democracy means no elections, something that blows people's minds. But of course you can do this. So back to your point around governance, I think like we're in the internet has not yet properly solved governance. DAOs are trying to do this, but we're like we've done like this compared to what we can do.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's like I feel part of maybe what's happening here as well with this kind of like movement. I mean, it's a start at that high level as well. Like, what's your view on network states?
Yeah. Back to the idea, the concept of startups. There's a lot of pain points that network states are trying to solve, and different network states are trying to solve different problems. So when you hear the number one thing that Balaji is trying to solve is a problem around regulation and sovereignty. Like that's the thing that the West is going down, China is going up. You want to guarantee the values of the West, but it cannot be in the West. Or maybe people are trying to do that, but you want to safeguard, you want a way, and so let's rebuild it from scratch. That is for sure one pain point that you can solve. It's not the only one. Many people want to solve the issue of community and culture, right? Okay, how can we live together in a space that is amazing and is unlike what we see today, right? And many of the network states that you talk with are focusing much more on that than on what Balaji is doing. Like I was talking with Akshat from Australia, and he's focusing on that. He's like, for me, it's about the amazing, like building an amazing culture, an amazing community with amazing people.
Yep.
Much more than the
sovereignty or regulation.
Exactly. And if you talk with Niklas from Infinita in Prospera, he tells you, okay, I need three things. I need the infrastructure, I need the regulation, and I need basically the people, the culture, community. Like depends on. So you need these three things to be solved. What's underlying that is, yes, I do want a full alternative to the network to governments today. I want a full new country. So that's going in the direction of Singapore. It's going in the direction of Dubai. But there's a gradient in these things. Like it doesn't. It's not one thing. So that's the biggest part to the answer. So there's many different network states that can emerge from this. For me, one of the things that obsesses me about it is the execution. It's like, okay, you might have really different goals, and many of these goals are valid. How do you make this happen? And it's so fucking hard. Can we swear here?
Yeah, I already have, so don't worry about it. You're good.
Yeah. it is very hard, and so that goes back to the network effect and the cold start problem.
It is, right? But it's also again as someone has studied history, like all of this is almost like the oldest industries. You know, everything is governed, right? It's just a question of how it's governed. We've been building nations, we've been building cities, communities, villages, homes. These are just like foundational things that we've been doing since the dawn of time, right? So like, you know, this is as old as time. And everything that we're talking about has been done before. Maybe just like there are some new variations, and I basically agree with you. I think there are opportunities to do things that have not been done before by upgrading the approach of kind of like of old things towards it. But the more I look at it, at least, the more I think that this stuff is extremely possible.
It is. It is, and so to your point, I think one difference that I feel, I don't know yet, but I feel like might happen is that historically, a lot of this was very organic and very slow, and so people might not have been conscious about a lot of these decisions. But now that we can do it so fast, like you can be consciously designing these things, and that opens up to so much fun and interesting, intellectually like stimulating and executionally like challenging problems. Like for example, I think there's a logarithmic relation to how hard it is growing a community. What do I mean from that? It's as hard to get a community from 1 person to 10 than from 10 to 100.
Sure.
From 200 to 1,000. 1,000. Sorry. So I don't think that it is logarithmic in that each order of magnitude is going to have a completely different challenge, and doesn't get easier. Right? It gets easier insofar as adding one more person gets easier, but not adding one more order of magnitude. And each order of magnitude is different in the challenge that you have. And that's very similar to what happens in companies, right? Everybody says like when you're adding one layer of management, like you have a completely different set of problems. Right? And so it's not the same to have, when you go from 1 to say 15 people, it's different from 15 to 70, because then you don't have everybody in the same room. So it's problematic. When you pass 150, now you don't know everybody in person. So a different challenge. So the same thing I think happens here, where, for example, a community that is struggling to get to from like a few dozen to 100 or 150, that's a special challenge. And then going from there to 1,000 is going to be a completely different challenge that you have to solve with completely different tools. And each one of these requires the same level of engineering, and also like pretty interesting levels of engineering, of social engineering that you need to achieve to make that happen.
It's actually interesting. I think about that a lot, again, on multiple levels.
So
many levels to that. So to your point about this conscious choices, it's not written, but I actually think a value of ARC is deliberate. That actually the whole, everything is about being deliberate. That you should, you should assume malintent, but that's like a separate kind of like point. But I think like, again, this cold start issue that you've referenced, right? And this challenge of going from 0 to 10, 10 to 100, these different orders of magnitudes. I do often, again, I think part of what we're doing here, for example, and this may be a question then about your reflection on layer 1 versus layer 2s, is that I think part of what we're trying to do is that I feel like I want to avoid some of those early stages. It's like, I think when we start with our area of land where we're going to have our, some autonomy to write some laws or rules, whatever it is, that actually, because the challenges of building, is between 0 and 10 is so different to the challenge that you need to succeed at 1,000 to 10,000.
Yeah.
I'm sort of like, look, I think we just need to jump in and start at like 1,000, right? So that you just avoid some of these problems.
Oh, interesting.
Because we deal with problems today that are just different to the problems that matter at like 1,000, you know? And there's like a really interesting flux we're about to go through now as well, where we move from like single building to multiple buildings, which is another really interesting kind of like thing. Like a lot of businesses fail. Particularly actually one of my old co-founders is in the room, and one of the, we were building one of these like literally probably like the world's first like dark kitchen, as people like refer to them like today. And one of the key inflection points investors were looking for was like when you could go from not just running a single site, but to be running multiple sites, because that's the difference in complexity between running one versus even two. Is that these are just different businesses, right? And so actually this was like a real key inflection point. And I think what's interesting here again is that we're about to go through that change. And what's interesting is they are just like different businesses, you know, or the complexity is very different. And I feel like it's a very interesting transition period we're about to go through here through multiple sites. But yeah, I do think, and I wonder again, is like, well, how can you jumpstart the network, right? So like actually when you're starting, you're dealing with not 3 people, but 3,000 people. And then you solve a lot of these challenges where and again, just like every marketplace, right? It's like, you know, if a user comes and there is not a supply of the thing that they want, then they churn and they're not in, right?
Yes.
But it's basic stuff. And it's the same here. Like someone comes and if their co-founder's not here or their life partner or their, you know, if these things are not here, then they churn. And actually, if you have this instant sort of like, you know, basically, I guess it's like, this is a long-winded question, right? But it's a reflection on like, maybe there's a shortcut to an initial sort of like market size, and actually maybe there, you know, and maybe there's a way that you can just start your idea. Thoughts, please.
No, super interesting. And so I'll just think out loud. I'll share the thoughts I have so far, and we can think together. This is the most fascinating topic. So my mental framework comes from tech. So tech has this problem of network effects all the time, and they have a way to solve it, which is when you have a problem of you don't have enough demand because there's not enough supply, and you don't have enough supply because there's not enough demand. What you take is a vertical. Like you take a very narrow aspect of it, and then there you're going to go for whichever side of the marketplace is most important, and you're going to artificially, inorganically get a lot of it. And then once you have that side, then the other side on that vertical is going to come, right? And then once you have that, okay, you can start expanding for that. So what are some examples? When Uber opens a new city, they go and talk with all the people who can be like drivers. That's the supply side. And they tell them, that day at that time, I am going to pay you all a bunch of money so you're available. That's it, right? No matter how many people you take, right? So they artificially, in one vertical, which is a city, they're artificially maximizing supply, and therefore the demand is going to come because people are expecting that day that there's going to be a lot of supply. Therefore they come, and once that happens, now it's working. And you do that across every single marketplace. It's the exact same thing. You have like Facebook, for example, open in specific countries in specific times, and not before because they had to be ready, and so on and so forth. And so if you take that lesson, you can start seeing some of the patterns of what people are doing today. So for example, one of the paths that network states are using to start is I'm not doing a full-time people, I'm doing part-time. It's like 1 month, right? So instead of, I'm not doing citizens, I'm doing like kind of a conference holiday-ish, right? So Zuzalu is an example, right? 1 month, 2 months, that's fine. You can do that. You can get a lot of people in one place, okay, and they know each other. And once they know each other, you're creating a lot of community inorganically, and then some of these might come later, right? So that's one way you can look at it. Another one that you can look at it is for here Network School, where the inorganic aspect is the 1 month long thing, very heavy startup, AI crypto, right? So you attract all these people, you put a lot of them together, and then some of them will want to stay for the long term, and now you have a funnel. It's like, okay, like from the Ether to 1 month, and then from 1 month to 1 year. And so then now Network School is at 100 people. And so the question becomes, okay, how do you go bigger? And so now you have to start segmenting the verticals, right? So for example, usually the default type of person that comes here is going to be younger and male because they're more risk prone. And then you have two problems. One of them is the people who come here for a month or two versus the ones who stay for a year or two. These are different crowds. They intermingle, but they're different because if you stay a year or two, you don't want to be just making a lot of friends and then you lose them. So they, by nature, they're going to be separate. That's fine. You need to cater to two now audiences. And then for you to stay, if you're long-term or if you want to stay, if there's a gender bias the way there is by nature, but if you're 20 to 30-year-old, which is the demographic for coming single alone here, you're going to usually be single, and you don't want, like, your two priorities are work and partner, right? So you have to solve the work side is being solved, but the partner side is not being solved. And so, like, you do need to solve the gender imbalance issue. To me, it should be the number one priority that is unsolved today. And so then so if you are managing growth for Network School, one of the first priorities should be, how do you get more women to get the gender imbalance ratio? But that's just one of the segments. There's another segment potentially that you could go for, which is families, right? And so, okay, what are the pain points for the families? And the number one pain point there is, I think, like, as a family, it means that you have children. If you have children, they need to go to school. There's no school today. What do you solve, right? And so the number one thing you need to solve is education, which is basically non-existent here today. So then you can start thinking of these segments and then start solving problem after problem for each one of these verticals. And I think that's how you go.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting. I guess, like, I think maybe one of the things that is hardest about this is the fact that, and this is one of the things I find myself repeating at the minute, and so you can come back at me and poke some holes in it, but I keep saying now that, like, focusing on a single segment is, like, doomed to fail. Because even if you're targeting the smallest sort of, like, niche of person, right? You are targeting these, like, 25 to 30-year-old, AI tech bros from San Francisco that, like, care about nothing but eating ramen noodles and shipping code right in the thing, right?
Yes.
Even for them to take this as a place they would be permanently versus temporarily requires you, for that segment or for that niche, for it also to be a place, exactly like you're saying, where they can either bring their partner or find their partner, bring their parents, have children, their dog, their friends, right? Even for a niche, for it to be a permanent, not a temporary experience, you have to, I mean, again, there's going to have to be some sort of rollout, or maybe step by step, or maybe not, I don't know, but it's like, this is perhaps one of the things why it's so hardest, that actually, like, it's difficult to constrain the market artificially for a very particular type of customer, so that you can serve them exactly what this particular niche wants, know. And so actually, maybe, like, it's just harder to get that marketplace going because there's such a high cost of supply, of subsidizing supply in the beginning.
And I think you said it, right? I think the question, the step by step, I think that you underlying what you're saying is, how fast should you be expanding the verticals? Like, and I think you're totally right. Like, and if you're like Balaji here, or like any other founder in any of these network states, there's a very core question of, how much do I spend focusing on this group first, right? So, for example, in Prospera, they have Infinita focusing on healthcare. And well, it's very early for healthcare there, so it's very obvious that they need to spend years working on healthcare. And then like, maybe they can do other industries in parallel, and that's fine. But healthcare needs a lot of attention for a long time. Here in Network School, I don't know what the answer is. Like, maybe they should keep doing this for years, focusing on this demographic, or maybe they should already open. I don't know, and I'll have a full answer for that today. I think when you look at tech, it's also not so straightforward when you go from one vertical to more.
So again, so you came here for the first time like 3 months ago or so, right? And what did you expect to find? And was there a delta between what you sort of expected and then what you actually came across?
So if we go back to that mental framework that Niklas from Infinita has of, you need infrastructure, you need regulation, and you need people / community / culture, and these three things you need to solve. What's brilliant about what Network School has done is that it has released one of these constraints, which is the infrastructure one, right? Doing one of these three things is nightmarishly difficult, doing 3, imagine, right? So it makes sense to release as many of these as possible. And that's the beauty of what Balaji has done here. It is, okay, like I'm looking at this, it so happens that I can release this problem by going for distressed real estate, which is what Forest City is. And so the downside is, yes, it's kind of empty, and it's a bit eerie in that regard, but it works. It works. And so I think that was a bit of a surprise. I had no idea what to expect, and like seeing this huge city summoned from nothing, and then like being pretty empty. That is unbelievably memorable. So that was, I think, that's the thing that's most memorable for most people, I think, today. But then, of course, I think I think what shocked me the most about this is not as much what happened when I saw 3 months ago, but the gap between what I saw 3 months ago and today. And there's so many more people, and there's so many more much more light. And doing that in the space of 3 months is pretty spectacular.
Yeah, this is the thing. Like, this thing has not been open a year. Yeah, you know, we've had a first birthday, right? But it's not been open a year, right? And like that there's so much stuff that is sort of like changing, sort of like every day.
Yeah.
Have you been to other places, like to some of the other sort of experiments, the other sort of like network stage charter cities? Like, have you been following some of the other projects?
I've been to, so first, we shouldn't forget that Singapore and Dubai and even Abu Dhabi are network states.
Sure. OGs.
And so I've been to those, and then this year I've been to Forest City and Prospera. Those are the 2 that I've seen. Yeah.
And what did you think of Prospera then on the ground?
So and this is something I've shared with them. So pros and cons. An island in the Caribbean is as good as you can get.
Pretty gorgeous
for the place. Like, it's freaking amazing, and it's so close to the United States, so you have very naturally a lot of people who could go there. So that was a huge win. Of course, it's Honduras, which the government is not super happy with them today. So that's obviously a problem. One of the things that is not... So first, they're the most successful. They have the most people. The hotel there is unbelievable. They have a tower now that's fantastic. So they have so many good things. And I think the bet on healthcare makes a lot of sense. You wanted to do healthcare tourism for clinical trials. Makes a ton of sense to start with that and then expand in healthcare, because it's a hyper-regulated industry. And so reducing the regulation is not just good for the people who travel there, it's just good for society. Like, the FDA in the United States is way too regulated, and it's killing people every day because drugs are not approved fast enough. So this is good for everybody. For me, the number one issue that I see in Prospera today is that when we talk about infrastructure, regulation, and people/culture, the infrastructure is not helping for the culture. So they have 2 different areas. That's already problematic, right? Because when you're living, when there's few people, you want everybody to be together and live like, make a huge, strong community. So if you're spreading them into places, that's not going to work as well. There's a lot of villas and like big houses. Again, that doesn't help. They have a building, which is what I think 14 stories or something like this. And that's amazing because you increase the density of population in one specific area. So that could be the kernel of everything. And we can see it here, right? The hotel is the heart of the place because there's huge density of population. But in their case, the hotel has a parking, and then it's structured so that people can take the car and then leave.
Yeah.
And like, that is such a missed opportunity. So like, you should make that the heart of everything, to make it in a plaza, for example, with shops there and restaurants or whatever. And that should be the heart of it, because if you don't do something like this, you're not going to have community. If you don't have community, people will not want to come and stay.
Yeah. And it's a challenge. I mean, I think they know all of this, right? And they would love for this to do exactly what you say, right? And it's part of this marketplace issue where for them, it's like, oh, I mean, that infrastructure, right? They need to build that infrastructure. For that infrastructure, they need real estate developers. And as real estate developers, you need demand. And it's just this like chicken and egg stuff all the time, right?
And in the case they solved it, right? They have the 14, they already have the 14-story building, but they haven't done the plaza. So I like talking with him, I think they're going to do this, and I hope they do. Because I think that specific problem is the next step and then solvable.
Yeah, yeah, and there are other projects now adjacent to just starting to be developed. So again, it's going to change, right? It's just like how fast can we, or how can we accelerate these things, right? Which is what I think about a lot. Did you look into to seasteading at all? Like, do you have a hot take on seasteading?
I need to write. So I do have one. So I was talking with Patrick Friedman the other day,
Yeah.
and to me, there is a solution to that, which is, and I don't understand why people haven't done it. So maybe like I must be missing something. Why haven't people bought old cruises?
Mm-hmm.
You buy an old cruise, you shop around to the 200 countries that are around, and say, okay, like who wants to give me full freedom? Like I'm gonna pay you some amount of money every month and just let me do whatever I want. Like some hands are gonna raise. You put the flag from that country. Like if it has to be a landlocked country like Botswana, like perfect, let's do that. And then you put that cruise in international waters.
Yep.
If you put that in a reasonable place, the governments are not going to be trying to shoot you down,
Yep.
right? And you can probably relatively easily get your food and water back from the mainland. If you don't like the relationship, you can probably move on. But I'm sure you can have stable governments that are okay with you having the money because you can move, right? If you're like Sealand, for example, you couldn't move, so they have all the power, so they're going to abuse it. Yeah. But if you can move because you have a cruise,
yep.
then you have the power, and they're going to behave nicely to you. And so, and who wouldn't want 5,000 like entrepreneurs or whatever, like people close to their city, yep. right? Barcelona might not want that, but many other cities do, right? And cruises are dirt cheap. Like the amount of money that you need to spend for a cruise is quite low, right? I think you can buy one for like $200 million, which is a fair amount of money. But like building a proto country for $200 million does not sound like that expensive.
Sure.
And so I think like the cruise thing is why hasn't anybody tried this?
I mean, I think people have. I think people struggle on the economics, and then I think they struggle on who wants to be on this permanently, and do people actually want it moving around to different locations, like a la a cruise, or are people happy like just fixing it up somewhere? I mean, the Seasteading Institute itself at the minute is working on a new flag, to back to the beginning of that thing. So actually, like there you can actually get international recognition on the on the high seas under a new flag, such that you could be governed slightly differently, because yes, a lot of these kind of like newer experiments struggle with sort of like international recognition even at sea, or with maybe nations not being comfortable with them being flagged that way. But I think that I think there's still a lot of room. Again, I think there's still a whole bunch of stuff that hasn't been hasn't been fully bottomed out that that can be done there.
I agree with you. So just adding one thing is so we're talking about regulation, infrastructure, and community, people, culture. To that point, you're talking about the regulation is unsolved, which might be the case. I don't know the details. I'm talking about the infrastructure here, and the point I think on the cruise is it has to be the cheapest solution, because it's the only one that can make at scale and in a repeatable way livable environments for long term. It has to be the first option.
I mean, this is for where you're playing for like as near to full sovereignty as we're talking about, like building a new sort of country, right?
Well, potentially, but there's infrastructure. We talk regulation, infrastructure, and people, community. Like maybe you say, okay, no, I'm not gonna be playing with the regulation aspect. Sure. I do want to do seasteading, and so infrastructure, like it's already solved.
Okay, if you want to do seasteading, but it's more expensive than just like building a hotel on land, as an example, right? Like a hotel at sea is more expensive than a hotel at land.
Easy though.
What, building it at sea?
I don't know. Like just very quickly, off the top of my head, if you can buy a cruise for 200 million, and I think there's 5,000,000 people who can do this, right? So like the 200 million divided by
400,000 a head, is it? Or was it 40,000 a head?
Let's make a calculation, because this is relevant, right? So you take 3 zeros out. Yeah, no, this is 220 to 02 divided. So okay. Yeah, divided by 5. So it's 40,000.
Yeah.
It is 40,000. For $40,000, you can have your room for like forever in that cruise.
But I think that again, the ongoing cost, if you're moving around the ongoing cost, if you just park it and anchor it and you can't move it, I think costs come a long way down, right? Like, I often joke about even the way we might start ARC is just like running a ship aground on an underwater atoll. And then it's like, but it's like, wait, if you've got a ship that's seaworthy, why would you run it aground? Just park it up the side. So then you can run away if you need to, right?
Going back to the economics, and they really do matter here. Like if you're spending $400,000 to buy something, and then the maintenance and like all the costs cost you $1,000 a month, right? Versus you're spending $40,000 and it costs you $1,500 a month. Like it's a no-brainer. Even $2,000, even $3,000 a month is a no-brainer.
So I mean, I've had multiple cruise ships across my desk asking me to buy into this thing, right? And the prices are never that low. Let's put it that way. So maybe someone's just not figured it out. I think the economies are wrong. You know, it's just I think that maybe it's just like the cruise ship.
I hear you, and I'm sure you're right.
But it's possibly the whole point is that, you know, there should be some other approaches where you can get somewhere there, and this should sort of make sense for a certain group of people to try and run.
Let me rephrase. If there is a viable solution for seasteading, it has to be first cruises, because it is the cheapest one, and it has to be because it's the only way to do seasteading at scale in a repeatable way. So if you want economies of scale, it has to be the cruise. So it has to be cheapest.
I mean, it's certainly cheaper. I mean, we're on reclaimed land at the minute, as kind of like as well, right? So this was, and you know, the accounts aren't quite public exactly how much was spent sort of like here, but like estimates for reclaiming sort of like a, you know, if you're trying to raise 20-meter deep sort of like water, you're anything from 100 million to $1 billion per square sort of like mile, depending on where you are in the world. So so again, like even at the lower end of the estimate, 1 mile is a cruise ship. But obviously you can fit a hell of a lot more on 1 mile than you can a cruise ship, right? Like I'm guessing that a cruise ship is just like a few hectares or whatever it is, right? But yes, so I don't know. So I feel that again, like the capital is deployed into projects of this sort of nature, where you could have the same amount of capital deployed for other seasteading sort of like projects. There's a lot of momentum on this anyway, so we'll see. But so again, so seasteading, I think it's very interesting. And are there any other approaches that you have considered that you are surprised that people aren't considering, right? Like, you know, just like, whether it's, you know, getting a cruise ship that unrelated to seasteading necessarily, right? Unrelated to unclaiming lands, or like paths to new states, to new Dubais, new Singapores that that you think are opportunities that are out there that you're surprised haven't been explored.
Not that I have thought of, but I think that there's some. If you think of in first principles, I think what type of place would be ideal for this, right? Islands are ideal because you're secluded, so you can create your own community from there. And so you want to, and the most successful by far nation states, Dubai, new kind of nation states, city states, network states, Dubai and Singapore both follow the same path, which is the first thing that they built is a trading port, and everything came from that. Right? And so it's like, okay, where in the world are there islands close to places where there's lots of trading, but not yet an amazing trading port? And I think there's a bunch of them. One of them is actually the Caribbean.
Well, even like the opportunity for separate Panama canals, right? Like is something that's kind of like there, but keep on.
So that's a good point. And so Panama is already like reasonably big, but I think there's a chance, especially close to the United States. The United States, the problem that it's the Jones Act, right? So the Jones Act, you cannot, like if you trade from one US port to another US port, it has to be a US vessel, which is very problematic. For example, if you're coming from Panama with a bunch of goods, and you unload part of them in Houston, you cannot go on to Miami.
Sure.
Right? And so there is I think a huge opportunity there for a US approved port that doesn't do the Jones Act. And there's many places where this could happen. Puerto Rico is a perfect example for this. Guantanamo is a perfect example of this. Guantanamo could be a new city state. And the Caribbean has like 100 billion countries. So like finding one that can do this, I think like this should be that should happen. Just to give you an example, another example, the single most trafficked area in the world for maritime trade is also the least secure.
Suez, we know? Or
Yeah, close to Suez, exactly. So Suez, the thing about Suez is between Europe and Africa, East Africa, and the rest of the world. But that traffic diverges between Somalia and Yemen.
Sure.
So actually, that point between Somalia and Yemen is a better. So you can see like the star, like drawing for you. Here you have Asia coming from here. You have Africa coming from here, right?
Yep.
And then going to Europe. And so here is Suez. But here, this is the crucial point in basically, I would argue, all maritime trade in the world, which is why Somalia has pirates, because it's so valuable that they can. How cool would it be to have a city state there, network state there, that also, like as a side effect, makes some peace in the area, which every country in the world would love, right? It so happens there's an island there. It's of 6,000 square kilometers big. It's pretty big. It's called Socotra. It belongs to Yemen, but it's occupied by the UAE today.
Interesting.
UAE, which loves doing network states. And so how cool would it be to have a network state in that island?
So interesting, because I think that, I think there's loads of possibilities that aren't fully explored. For example, like, could you think you'd even get new Emirates issued,
Right.
even at that sort of like level, like I think that's, and I think totally, I talk literally about that point, that I think, like, imagine a non-Arab emirate. I mean, just a crazy, like, the potential that might have for like some sort of reconciliation in the region as well could be very interesting. I don't know, just something that's floating there. Neom's obviously a little bit up the coast kind of as well. They've got their new port, kind of like Oxagon, just up the coast. It's not quite at that like detail port. There's a lot of stuff that's happening kind of like there. To come at you on one thing you said there about like Dubai and Singapore being around these ports, right? And to go back to almost our first point of discussion here, was like there may be patterns in history that wouldn't be the same here. All of the S&P 500's growth over the last 25 years has been from tech. Once you strip out inflation, basically like port industries have basically, kind of like shrunk. Obviously global trade is still extremely important. Do you think that it's as good a strategy today as it was before, given the importance of sort of like tech for future growth of any sort of economy?
Yeah, I think yes, because if you do that move, it's not about capturing part of the growth of the economy. It's about capturing a share of the existing economy. And the value created by having an entry port in that point in the world, I think, is extremely high. So I think it's viable. I think your point is very valid, where I think what you're underlying what you're saying is, today you can create a city or a city state or a network state virtually anywhere in a way that you couldn't before. And that's true. That's for sure true. So you have much more freedom today than you used to have. But like even more than that, right? So if you push these arguments, before you needed a river. You needed a river because otherwise you don't have water and you're dead. You needed agricultural land. Like there's a few things that you needed, and we're releasing each one of these. Even today, like very recently, we started releasing a new one, which is energy. Up till now, you had to have access to oil. And so if you're far from oil routes, it's a very big problem. But that's not the case anymore with solar and batteries. Like we're getting to a point in the cost of solar and batteries where you can arguably live virtually anywhere in the world. It's like an island like in the South Atlantic, which would have been impossible before to live, now is viable.
Yep. So many interesting things here. Again, back to another one of your comments earlier in this, you talked about, again, this network states being this sort of extension of, or like an evolution of the sort of the West, and as a way to maybe sort of like actually, save what might be sort of like an inevitable sort of like future.
Yes.
I guess there's like, some of the things that we've been discussing over the last couple of days, like, do you associate the West with Christianity, and therefore do you associate if network states as sort of like an extension of sort of like the West, or trying to save or preserve that? Do you see some network states as sort of like manifesting sort of like Christian values?
Potentially, I think there is an inheritance from there, from the rights of the droits de l'homme, the rights of the humanity. What's the name in English? I don't remember. The human rights. there is an inheritance of human rights from Christianity, but I think they have been repackaged in the human rights, which everybody, like nearly every country, has signed on. So I think you could say, like, what I don't like about the Christianity side is like that triggers teams, whereas if you talk about human rights, it doesn't trigger this thing. And so if you can just look at human rights and go for that. And so, like, the most fundamental one is freedom of speech. If you don't have a freedom of speech, you don't have anything else, right? And that's the most that's the most basic, but it's also the most threatened, right? You don't have freedom of speech in China. You don't have freedom of speech in Singapore. You don't have freedom of speech in Dubai. You don't have freedom of speech in the UK and in many of the European countries. And so, like, the most, like, you don't need to go very far. Like, the single most important one is the most threatened. And so just that one justifies trying to do this. Now, of course, the US is pretty good at keeping freedom of speech because it's in the Constitution. And so to justify why would you create another country outside of the United States, then you need to go down the hierarchy in these freedoms. And I think, like, in the case of the US, there's other problems. There's a lot of regulation problems. There's a crime problem. There's, like, a bunch of these things where you do want another set of regulations that abides by this. But for me, the number one is just freedom of speech.
Interesting. I mean, and maybe this then again, like, brings us into maybe the talk that you were giving the other day, sort of like here as well, right? You have a hypothesis on how the future is going to sort of like unfold, kind of like right now. Do you want to just talk a little bit about like how you see nations evolving, or how you see the West evolving as it stands?
Yeah, the core idea of the presentation is that most of the technologies that we've discovered in the past 500 years happen to concentrate power in capitals, right? So energy was before it was distributed through solar energy, and then it was concentrated through, like, oil and coal. And then agriculture at the beginning, like early on, was distributed, and then new forms of wealth, such as trade, is concentrated in cities. And so across the board, like, every technology concentrated power. But maybe coincidentally, virtually all of the technologies that we're discovering over the last few decades are decentralizing power. Crypto is obviously the example. The internet is obviously an example. Solar energy, now with solar panels, is another example. Drones for violence are another example. So, like, literally every technology is decentralized. And so, like, with a big caveat, potentially with AI. And so, like, if that is true, therefore power will be decentralized, which means that nation states are not going to have the power they used to have. And so the question is, who is going to have the power? And so if you look at the past, it's just more distributed. There are more stakeholders that have more power. And so if you look at what's happening today, you can see that today citizens have more power, companies have more powers, countries can keep each other more accountable. So it's like a distribution. Supranational entities have more power. And so it's just, and you can keep going on. There's just a complete decentralization of power with many, many more players than we are used to. So it's kind of a neo-medievalism in that, like, before, power was extremely distributed, and we're going back to this kind of very highly distributed power.
Yeah, interesting. So I sort of agree on one side, and then it's just like, it feels that at least like a lot of these governments are trying to clasp power even more closely than they ever have, right?
Yeah.
And I guess, and actually part of how they're able to do that is by leveraging a lot of these new technologies, right?
Yeah.
And even things as maybe like I don't know, as like solar panels or whatever,
Yeah.
right? And they've like that sort of like decentralizing force, almost actually as a force of robustness for an existing centralized system, right? That, okay, you're Ukraine and you don't have one power plant that can get knocked out by a foreign actor. You now have a completely decentralized power system, and you can't be taken down in the same way. Like, these decentralized technologies can make centralized powers, deploying them, more powerful as well. I sort of like kind of like feel, but Yeah, like, again, like, our government's just sort of like clutching at straws as they try and sort of like fight an inevitable sort of like decline of these sort of central power structures, or yeah, are they gonna be able to win and control us more, not just through AI, but through other mechanisms?
I think to your point, I think they can, but the fact that the structure makes it easier or harder is the defining force. Like in the case of solar panels for Ukraine, for example, yes, it's giving energy to the central government there, but it's also giving power to everybody else, right? And you could argue that even there, the forces are much more independent now than they used to be. But even if you go to normal states, one that is not in war, like you can see it. Like anybody can get their solar panels, anybody can get the batteries, and they can regulate. Hey, you are forced to connect to the grid, but how do they know? Right? And so like you need at this point an extremely, like if you don't become extremely surveillance state with AI and whatnot, there is no way for you to do this. Like in the US, there's 350 million people. Like how can the government know who has solar panels? It's not so straightforward. You can satellites and whatnot, but it's not so straightforward. Crypto, like why are they so obsessed about KYC and AML stuff? Because it is so much harder today. Before you walked into the bank and you're there and you give your ID and they know who you are and they have you through the bank. But now you're trading your crypto with a random like place based in Anguilla and they don't know. And so yeah, they can force how much they want about KYC and AML to catch you. But now the force, before the force was in favor, and now it's against. It's a headwind now. What it was, I think these kind of structural changes are so big and so powerful that when you have a tailwind that becomes a headwind, it's very, very hard to fight. And I think we have examples of this, like for example, um, many countries tried to do a global corporate tax, a minimum of 15%, and they failed. Ireland didn't want it. Hungary didn't want it. They fought toe and nail, and at the end it was the U.S. who killed it. But even then, it was 130 something countries that signed it out of 100, like nearly 200 countries, and so you still had 60 countries that you could go to bypass this. And so like it's so hard to get 200 countries to create a monopoly on all this stuff and get all the information structured to catch their citizens, that most countries are not gonna do it. You might have a few who do, and China is the perfect example.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And so this is the big. I think there's two angles of that. I'd love to just. You were obviously writing about AI, and you have been. You mentioned it again, even like 5 years ago, right? And so you've been thinking and writing a lot about AI. I'm interested in more detail, but again, like just like again the impact of AI on the state, particularly your views on that, and then actually deeper than that is, if you're correct and there is this decentralizing force on all of these governments, if China doesn't fall to that same decentralizing force, does this decentralizing force like critically actually sort of like weaken all of China's adversaries such that it can just like pick people off one by one and end up with its sort of like one world order because we've decentralized all the Western power, we've not decentralized the problem. That's sort of a question.
It's impossible to predict the future here, right? But so some thoughts about this. First is China is working with a handicap, which is the lack of freedom of speech. When you don't have freedom of speech, you cannot, like the definition of it, well, not the definition, but the biggest handicap is that you cannot criticize power. If you cannot criticize power, it's hard to improve because you don't know what the problem is.
Sure.
And so like they're working with a big handicap already. But of course, AI enables you to do many things that you wouldn't be able to do. And so my guess is like the CCP will remain in power as long as the economy keeps growing, which is a big caveat because the population is starting to shrink already in China. And GDP per capita is also a function of population growth. So if your population starts shrinking, it's much harder to keep growing your GDP. And if you are having a shrinking economy, it's much harder to keep people happy if they don't have a political say, right? Everybody's getting wealthier. Okay, I'm good. I'm not going to say something. Oh, now the pie is shrinking. I want a bigger piece of the pie, so I'm going to complain. So that's, I think, my take on China is like, I'm not sure what's going to happen there, but it's not as good as it looks like, even though I think AI is going to help them have a bigger surveillance state. Back to your more fundamental points, there was a fear that AI could be a centralizing power. In some ways it is, because the more money you pour into it, the better your model. But we're seeing so much competition in these foundation models that it looks like it's going to be very hard for any one player to just control that technology.
Sure.
And so, like, my big fear of AI being extremely centralizing, I don't think is going to be the case, because what's going to happen is you cannot control it because there's too many players.
Yep.
And the value that is created at the user level. That's where most of the value is creating. So there's going to be so many startups that come, so much money being made, so many new ideas that are formed, that citizens are going to be improving at much faster pace than the government.
Yeah. I guess like the old fear, right, was that there was going to be someone was going to create super intelligence, right? Super AGI, right? Like first.
Yes.
And then by having that, if you're just a day ahead, that's enough for you to suddenly win and clamp everything down.
Yeah.
But I guess the greater concern is that just even like these, even on a level playing field, that no one has that, but just that these extremely advanced forms of AI that's available to everyone, state actors can use for massively controlling a population. Right? Yeah.
So it's a question. That's a race. Right? How, as the U.S. IRS gets better AI to monitor U.S. citizens across the world, how fast is like AI enhanced tax evasion plus crypto secrecy going to evolve? And I think like that race is hard to tell. My intuition tells me that there's so many of these technologies going in the decentralization direction that it feels like this side is going to be faster than that one, right? So people are going to be a bit more free than they used to be. But that's one of the most fascinating, that's one of the most determining questions of the 21st century, I think.
Yeah, and I wonder if, again, like part of like what the founders or the people that are building in this space are doing, right, is effectively fighting for the more optimistic version of those two features, right, to become the case, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe my last question for you then.
Like, this is what DeFi is, right? DeFi is this. They might not think decentralized finance. It's exactly this. So you have so many people working on this space. But anyway, you were saying.
No, just maybe the kind of like the last question for you would be, again, you've just spent time here at Network School. You're also just at the Network State Conference, and you've been interacting with tens of kind of like founders of these sort of like projects. I guess, like, given your view on the future and your lens and understanding of the past, are there any sort of like, did you have like some just advice, I guess, that you might give to people that are trying to build these new network states or try and steer us to a more positive future?
I feel like we're a bit like in the 70s, where these like Jefferson, Madison, and Hamilton would like start meeting to say, okay, like, what is this new society going to be like? And then they ushered into reality. So I think it is just a very hopeful moment. And we have all the tools to make it happen. This is a social coordination problem. Right? And so, like, social engineers here are the thing that's needed the most. And I'm seeing like so many of them here trying lots of different places, lots of different things. So I'm like, back to your point, I think I'm just very hopeful that all the pieces are going in the right direction. And now it's about executing, and executing goes to the minute details that we were talking about. Like, how do you do maybe a cultural ritual that makes people feel more at home when they come here and they want to stay more, and increases the retention rate or the conversion rate from monthly to annual, right?
Yep.
Like those are the things. It's one just so big of a startup mindset of now the total addressable market is here. There's a market that it's in the moment. So now it's time for the startups to go and execute.
No, I appreciate it. Well, look, obviously everyone should go and subscribe to your Substack to get your kind of like posts. Is it unchartedterritories.com?
TomasPueyo.com. But if you look for Uncharted Territories or my name, Tomas Pueyo, they will find it.
And is there any other particular request that you would have for an audience or anyone listening here? Any particular reason you want someone to reach out?
So interesting. Yeah. Yeah, maybe there is one. So we're talking here before about social engineering.
Yep.
And one way to think about it is just Schelling points, right? So Schelling points is when you have a coordination issue, is one thing that enables lots of people to coordinate. And the network school is a Schelling point. But I think there's more Schelling points that are needed for big decisions that can be made by society. For example, something that few people know is that we have a solution for global warming that is economically viable, and it's just sulfate injection into the stratosphere, right? There is a way to solve the problem of lack of marine life in the oceans, and it's iron fertilization, right? So there's a lot of these solutions to problems that we have in the world today that require a Schelling point for people to get together and make them happen. And so that's one of the things I'm trying to do with Uncharted Territories. So if you want to make the world a better place and you need a Schelling point, this is something I'm going to try to do. I'm going to try to make Uncharted Territories more about how to coordinate movements to make the world a better place. And sulfate injection and iron fertilization are two examples. So sign up for Uncharted Territories so we make the world a better place.
Amazing. Does this mean that you're also going to launch a layer 2 at Network School and come and bring everyone here to...
Essentially, so I'm talking, like, I have 4 children. It's like, okay, we need a school. So I'm talking with Balaji. It's like, okay, then build a school.
Yeah.
So it is something that I'm thinking about.
Yeah, no, amazing. Well, look, I would welcome you here with open arms. Thank you so much for coming here and spending time. It's really appreciate amazing conversation. I think so many people are going to find that interesting. Thank you.
Great, cheers, dude. Thank you.
There's people in the media who say that we're taking over the US and the UK because of like freedom cities and free ports, but is it 0% colonialism? Like, no, when you have outsiders coming in who are wealthier, there's gonna be challenges of class and getting them to move from Lisbon and San Francisco and Bali, and it's hard.
Yep.
And whereas in Africa, it's still urbanizing. I'm really leery of like things that start in revolution and start in violence. It kind of like sets the wrong tone, attracts the wrong people.
But have you thought about that process where gradually actually that zone can continue to expand?
Yeah, definitely. Like, look, people will bring up El Salvador to me, and I'm like, El Salvador doesn't need charter cities because Bukele reformed the entire country. I mean, we know where we want to get to.
Sure.
But what product can we build that users want today that does something useful that moves us in that direction? That's what I feel like people haven't figured out. But I've at least heard a decent number of like plausible proposals for things that could work. And I feel like with all this brain power, people are starting to figure out